Welcome to There is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell and I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's Fitness Programs and I've been in business since 1994. Today's episode is brought to you by Jonathan and Lynn Gilden at the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. They are simply the best. They have the most 5-star reviews on Zillow for real estate agents. And if you're looking to sell your house or to buy a house, they're the peeps that you are looking for. They can be reached at thegildengroup.com. I'm giving you their website because I want you to check it out. It's actually very well done and easily accessible. All right, so I had my annual physical today. Glad to report that all good. And as I'm being poked and prodded and all those good things all of us do when we go to the doctor, I started thinking, let's go over a lot of these wellness numbers because they are important. So as I come in, the first thing that happens, of course, is I get weighed in on the infamous scale. And even though I'm of, good body weight and all that, it's funny, I still catch myself wondering if I should take off my flip-flops. Yep, that's what I wore to the doctor today. But I didn't because I didn't want to look like that guy, so I kept them on. But, my old phone I had in my hand because I was anticipating a, nice long wait so I can sit in the waiting room and do very unproductive things on my phone. But it wasn't that long, but I still had my phone with me. Put that on the table because Lord knows you don't want that bad boy to weigh in, Contemplated taking my big old thick Mr. Costanza wallet out of my pocket, but again, didn't want to look like an asshole, so kept that there. Stood up on the scale and was like a freshman in college waiting for one of my exams back, as the nurse looks, and probably the medical assistant, I should say, at my number and just kind of casually writes it in the chart. And I'm thinking, all right, no comment, nothing? That's all you got? That's it? And I'm like, yeah, they honestly don't give a shit, So anyway, then we walk on down the hallway and I will report that my weight was exactly the same as it was a year ago. Like exactly the same, which is kind of weird. It was like 172.4 or something like that. With flip-flops on, people. With flip-flops on. Okay? That matters. Alright, so then I sit down and the lady, the nurse, the medical assistant, whatever she is, I must say, I'm kind of poking fun at them a little bit, but, I don't even know. Well, my doctor's name, my physician's name is Dr. Gottlieb, and I really like him. Like, he is such a good doctor, in my opinion. He's just so cool. I really like him. He's very thorough. So I'm poking fun, but he's got a great office. He's great, I should say. And so then I sit down, and she said something that I didn't quite decipher, so I, thought I heard something else, and I cracked a little joke because, don't we all have a little bit of that galley laughter when we go to the doctor? At least I think most people do. For those that don't know, look up what galley laughter comes from. It's actually pretty dark, man. Woo! I think my mom used to use that term all the time. I'm like, it's pretty dark when you really look up where it comes from. I'm not going to spoil it for you. But anyway, basically what it means is kind of like a little bit of nervous laughter, crack a joke. She was unpenetratable. Like, nada, nothing. Kept a little mask on, just kind of gave me a look and didn't hear what I said, and I just kind of muttered out nothing, So any event, then let's see, the next little gadget that I get hit with. I get hit with the old thermometer, of course. The way in the door, COVID changed that. That became the first thing they do now. And she didn't tell me the number. She just stared at it and put it in her pocket. But my temperature always runs a little bit low. And we were always taught when I was a kid, and I'm an old geezer at 56, that 98.6 was textbook average. Now they know that that's not true. And average temperatures run essentially between 97 and 99. Average normal temperatures, I should say. So there's that first little number for you. That's our normal body temperature. And here's a cool little piece of information for you. So when you exercise outdoors, your body always starts to run into a slight fever, in case you didn't know, which is why another reason why it's very critical to hydrate. When we say you need to warm up, that's actually really what we're talking about. We're talking about slightly raising your core body temperature, and you know you're officially warmed up when you start sweating. So anyway, just so you know, you do run a slight fever when you exercise outdoors, especially cardiorespiratory endurance, and the longer we go, the hotter we go typically, so it's very, very important to hydrate. You know what? I totally bounced over the first numbers. Okay, so the scale, all right? She didn't say anything because I'm of normal BMI. BMI stands for body mass index. Now, body mass index is just your height and weight. Please understand that. It is not your body composition. When I see ways to measure body composition in textbooks, because I used to teach, as I've said a million times, and they label BMI under body composition, I want to blow a gasket, because it's not body composition. Body composition is the difference between your fat weight and your muscle weight. So all this BMI is, body mass index, all that it is the difference between your height and weight over a slightly more advanced chart than the old-fashioned height weight charts. It is still predominantly pushed by the insurance companies, because the higher the BMI, the less they have to cover you, and that's used a lot with life insurance policies. So look, BMI is an adequate, decent number to give you an idea, but if you don't decipher it properly, it can get you into some trouble. For example, if you take a all-pro wide receiver in the National Football League, for those that maybe don't follow football, the wide receivers and the cornerbacks, in other words, the defensive backs, are of the most fit on a football field. Like, they look the most fit. Running backs and linebackers do too, and arguably any position on the field can, but your wide receivers are just known for basically having small waist, big arms, muscular legs. They're just jacked and ripped, right? So if you take the average guy, average player now, they're going to be around 6 foot, 6'1", 210, maybe even 220 pounds. So on a BMI chart, that's going to put them at obese. Now, if any doctor were to look at this wide receiver in their shorts and no shirt and call them obese, they need to take that medical degree right on back, because they are not obese. And in fairness to the BMI charts, it's even stated that BMI is not for the athletic population. So if you want an accurate measurement of your body composition, you have to have your body fat done. And the most accurate way and cheapest way to do that is through skin fold calipers, which we do and a lot of places do. Bioelectrical impedance, where they're the handheld things, which we've done because you can do mass numbers of them and it's less intrusive. They're okay, but they're not as accurate as skin fold calipers. And then you can go the real expensive route and do different forms of MRI and all that, but that gets expensive and it's also hard to find. So if you want an accurate assessment of body composition, you have to have your body fat done. So then we go back and we sit down, and now I'm back to the story where I cracked the joke and it was like trying to crack ice. It wasn't happening. So then the nurse, medical assistant, whatever she was, you know, she never really introduced herself. Oh well. Checked my oxygen saturation. Now that became a really big thing around COVID. I'm not saying COVID's gone, but in the peak of COVID, I think everybody was popping those bad boys out. And even people that had no really clue what they were. But I think the CDC and maybe some of the people on the media were telling people about certain numbers. But they've been around a long time, and they're a good tool. So they tell you your oxygen saturation. And what that means is how much O2 is actually in the blood, and the higher, the better. Normal is considered a really high number. Like basically, I think the textbook numbers are 95 to 100% is considered normal good. In other words, like there's not really one better than the other. When it starts to drop below 95, they start to look at like, okay, why? And when you start to get to the low 90s or whatever, that's a big problem. So when people were battling COVID and they had the extreme cases and people were getting around 90 or so, that's when they're hospitalized. Oh my God. That's when people were being hospitalized. Woo! That sounded great, didn't it? And maybe even a little bit higher than that. But the bottom line is, as you see, there's a quick downfall with that. So there's 95 and you're good. There's 90, get in here now. So basically what that means is there's not as much oxygen in the blood, and that could be a problem. And it's indicative of a problem going on in your lungs, basically, is where that's all coming from. If you get over 95, they're not going to say anything. I think mine was like 98 today or something like that. It always tends to be right around there. I can remember with my little obsessive brain during these things, I had COVID pretty bad, and Ellen had COVID pretty bad. I mean, we both actually did have to go to the hospital at one point, so it was pretty bad. And I can be far more of a hypochondriac than she can, so I had my thermometer out and I had my pulse oximeter out, and I probably checked it. I'd be lying if I said it was like less than 3 times an hour. It was probably more than that. And if it dropped a little low, I'd be like, hey, check this out. And then Ellen would check it, and I was like secretly like, ooh, it's a little bit lower than mine. Whew, I'm okay. Yeah, that's nice and selfish of me, isn't it? But anyway, yeah, that was those times, not very fun times. So take those out of the hands of hypochondriacs. Please take them away. All right. So then let's see, what do we do next? Oh, when we do the pulse oximeter, it checks your resting heart rate. Now, resting heart rate is a really good number to know. Now, mine was like 85 today, which is definitely high for me for resting, because mine tends to be in the high 40s and really no more than the low 50s when I'm sitting around. So, of course, is it human nature? Is it just me? I'd really like to think it's human nature, but I had to tell her, of course, that it's usually a lot lower than that, and that, I guess nerves from being at the doctor, and, yeah, she was great. She didn't even look at me or something. She's probably thinking, yeah, buddy, I don't care. I just want to get your vitals and get the hell out of here and go hit my vape pen and a cup of coffee and go to the next person. No, I don't know. I'm not saying she did that, but anyway, the joke did not land. But it was like 85. And again, so normal resting heart rate, and again, the medical numbers are so funny because they call normal 60 to 100. That's a huge, huge variation. So the best thing to know is you always want it lower. Now, they used to say like lower than 60. And when I say used to, I mean like when we used to start our cars with our feet and we had like rocks for tires, back when I hung out with Fred Flintstone on them. So that was like a long time ago. But they would say that the heart rate under 60 was bradycardia, and it is. That means lower heart rate, but they used to like they'd all get all concerned. Oh my goodness, it's too low. I remember when I worked as a physical therapist tech when I was in college and I was trying to learn the ropes. We had an old corker for a doctor that worked there, and he was old. I think they just pretty much hired him and put him there, Anyway, medical industry sometimes. But yeah, he was all over me once when he checked my resting heart rate, and I was doing all these triathlons at the time. I'm in my like mid-20s, and it was probably in the 40s, and he's scaring the hell out of me. I'm like, bro, I'm already a hypochondriac. I don't know that this is really necessary, And then, of course, I followed up, and my normal physician was like, dude, it's a good thing to have your heart rate lower. So it is, by the way, because what that means is when your resting heart rate is lower, that means your cardiac output is lower. Now, I'm not just here to crack jokes and make fun of myself in doctors' offices. This is a serious podcast. I like to do that because it makes it more fun. But, I do want you to understand that cardiac output means that is your pulse amount, the amount of blood you pump per beat, which is called your stroke volume, times your heart rate. That's what cardiac output is. So if your resting heart rate or submaximal heart rate is lower, that means that your heart is pumping more blood per beat. So the ejection fraction is better. Think about it. That's a good thing. That's like if you can pick up a rock and throw it, the further you throw it, the less throws you have to make, right? Or if you're a golfer, let's use a golf analogy. The further you hit the ball, the less strokes you have to take to get the ball in the pin, right? In the cup. So it's the same with stroke volume. The more blood your heart can eject with one pump, the less times it has to beat. So that's an absolute beautiful thing. And guess what lowers your resting heart rate? Exercise. So maybe that's why I was a little defensive defending my 85. But anyway, that's what that number means. And it's important to pay attention to. She then followed that up with blood pressure, and mine today was 125/70 or something like that. And it tends to be right around there. It's usually a little bit lower. At this point, I didn't bother pointing that out because she just didn't want any jokes or statements or comments from the peanut gallery, so I just kept that one to myself. Thankfully, the doc has a great sense of humor, and I was able to land some good ones, and I think he liked it because he was having a little bit of a stressful day himself. So anyway, blood pressure is really important, all right? So blood pressure is the amount of arterial, I think I need some more green tea, arterial pressure in the venous system and arteries. So it's important. So systolic blood pressure around 120 is now considered to be very good, very average, right? Well, I shouldn't say very good because they're actually trying to lower that number. The reality is it is very good. And you really don't start to see any issues until you get around 140. Now they're a little bit more cautious and start to say like around 130 you need to be looking at this a little bit more. Now diastolic blood pressure changes less than systolic blood pressure. You will see systolic blood pressure raise significantly during exercise. You will not see diastolic blood pressure raise that much, if at all, during exercise. It tends to only move about 10 points. So when you start to see diastolic blood pressure drop, and it could, or raise significantly during exercise, that's indicative of a problem, and that's one of the things they look for in a stress test. So typically the diastolic blood pressure doesn't move very much but 10 points, but you will see that systolic blood pressure raise during exercise, and I want you to understand that is normal. If it doesn't rise during exercise, Houston, we have a problem. It is supposed to raise. Now, if you're on beta blockers, it's not really going to raise because that's what beta blockers do. But your systolic blood pressure is supposed to go up and down, which means it's going to be more responsive to stress, right? So if it gets around 140, 150 significantly, and I am not a doctor, but you definitely want to get that checked out. Like, don't let that go, but just understand that the systolic is going to raise more, and its job is to raise. So 120 over just under 80 is considered like picture perfect, and if you get a good doctor, they know how to analyze that and basically state when there is a problem. In other words, for somebody, floating around the 130s, if it doesn't change for a long time, a good personal physician might say, you know what, let's just continue to keep this here, let's not let it go up. But if somebody had a low blood pressure forever and it's in the 130s, they may want to treat it. So it's something to always pay attention to. Like, I know I'm making a lot of jokes today, but I do not take blood pressure lightly. It's a very important measurement to continue to stay up on. It is one of the most important measurements that the doctors are going to get from your physicals, okay? And keep in mind, cardiorespiratory exercise will lower your resting blood pressure, and strength training done properly will not raise it, and studies actually show will lower it. 120 over 80, good number to think about. Good number to think about, but remember that a little bit lower than that is actually fine too. The drug companies like to change the numbers sometimes, which really infuriates doctors, and please don't lump the doctors all under big pharma and big medical, because the doctors I know don't like that, all right? It's not their fault, and they fight through it, and they still give you the real deal. So just always get a good doctor and trust them. Pay attention to your blood pressure in all seriousness, though. It's one of the more important numbers, and it's something 100% within your control. You can exercise and bring it down, and if it gets a little higher, it is not a big deal, and it's very much suggested that you do take a blood pressure medication to control it, because you don't want to get thickness in your atriums later on, which will cause problems in a floppy heart and all that, and that could come from having chronic high blood pressure. All right, something you can change, method to the madness. All right, now let's look at some of those labs. So triglycerides stands for blood fats, or that's actually what it is, and that's an important number to pay attention to, because if you have high triglycerides, chances are you're obese, and chances are your LDL cholesterols are high, and then your overall cholesterol is probably too high. So you don't want your triglycerides over 150. That's a number to keep your eye on. If you see it above 150 when you do your labs, your doctor is going to tell you. They do an excellent job with screening nowadays. We can say what we want about some of the federal laws, but one thing is it's all been standardized really well now. So anything that goes above the numbers gets red flagged, and then a good doctor calls you up and interprets it for you, just because it is a case by case, but there are standard numbers that they look at. So blood fats above, triglycerides above 150 need to be looked at. Like, what's causing that? Typically, again, it's obesity. Obesity causes so many of these things. It causes hypertension. It can cause hypertension, I should say. It can cause high triglycerides, and it can cause high cholesterol. All right, cholesterol. There's LDLs and HDLs. HDL stands for high density lipoproteins, and that's a form of cholesterol, and that is a good cholesterol because it carries the LDLs. LDL stands for low density lipoproteins, and it's the unhealthy cholesterol. So if you have a lot of HDLs, it can carry the LDLs, see? And if you don't have a lot of HDLs and you have a lot of LDLs, well, who's carrying the LDLs through? Think of it that way. So HDL is your good cholesterol, H for happy. LDL is your bad cholesterol, L for lousy. Now, in the old days, they used to say LDL is above 125 is a problem. They keep lowering it and lowering it and lowering it. And last I heard, it was even under 100 now that they want. Okay, now that's, again, recommendations by some of the drug companies, but a good doctor will say, look, your LDLs have always been around this number, no worries. So they will interpret it for you. Just know that you want your LDL cholesterols as low as they can be for the most part, unless you're in a very, very in a very unique situation. And your LDLs, they are highly genetic. They are one of the ones that's highly genetic. Woo! Did you hear that? I mean, that was right out my door and I jumped. They are highly genetic, but they also can be brought down by more of a plant-based diet, a lower saturated fat diet, and through exercise. Now, your HDLs can be raised through exercise, so that's good news. Now, they look at the ratio. They like to look at the ratio between the two, and that's going to give you your total cholesterol. In the old days, they just said a total cholesterol of under 200 was fine. That's still a pretty good number. But now they know, let's look at those HDLs and LDLs, because let's say your LDLs are 150 and your HDLs are only 30, well, that's not a good thing. Your total cholesterol is under 200, but your LDLs are too high and your HDLs are too low, okay? Now, for men, they like to say they like the HDLs above 40 and sometimes 45. For women, they want them above 45. Now, I don't know why they differentiate between the sexes on those two, but basically, HDLs below 40, they're going to tell you they want you to raise them. And yes, there's cholesterol drugs and all that, and that's between you and your doctor. I do know that a nice low-fat, low-sugar, plant-based diet definitely will help you improve your cholesterol. And yes, you do want to improve your cholesterol. There's no question about it. And exercise can help too. Because what ends up happening is heart disease, for the most, not all the time, but a lot of heart disease is from atherosclerosis. And what that means is you start to get plaque and buildup on the walls of the arteries. And the plaque and the buildup is coming from the cholesterol coming through the blood vessels and essentially sticking. So now the tubes that used to be wide open are no longer wide open. Arteriosclerosis is when they narrow, and a big part of that is from smoking and other conditions. But atherosclerosis is typically caused by blood fats and cholesterol levels being too high, the bad cholesterol. So it is something you want to control, and it's something that you do have control over. All right? Now, the other wellness one I want to look at today, let's look at your fasting glucose. Now, fasting means you haven't eaten, and your blood glucose is your blood sugars. That's another very important test that you need to always pay attention to. Anything over 100 to 126 or 125. 125 is considered pre-diabetic. So when you get a report back that says like it's 106 fasting, that can be, problematic. They oftentimes will want to check you again, but you're pre-diabetic. Let's look at that. Well, guess what the number one cause of that is? Obesity. The number one cause. So you think, I'm going to eat all this sugar and I'm going to cause diabetes. Okay, that doesn't happen. But being obese can cause type 2 diabetes. And one of the best ways to lower your blood sugar is to lose body fat. Absolutely. Okay? So under 100 fasting is good. It's a whole different ball game after you've eaten, of course, because that's not fasting glucose anymore. So these tests are considered fasting you haven't eaten when they're checked. Now, if they're over 126, that's considered diabetes. And if it's adult onset, meaning came upon you as an adult, that's type 2 diabetes. And at that point, absolutely will need to be treated one way or another with your physician. Just know that there is a lot you can do about it to not let it get there. And obesity is not one of the number one causes of type 2 diabetes, and we're already starting to see that, as I spoke about in a previous episode, in children and adolescents. We can do something about it. We have to stop obesity. There's a huge difference between being slightly overweight and obese. Slightly overweight, you could still be extremely healthy and extremely fit. That's not the problem in this country. It's the morbid obesity that we're seeing. And that's when all of these numbers start to change significantly. I'll wrap this up by giving you just a little brief story about COVID. So when I had COVID last year, it was time for my physical, and I had to do my blood work. And I had already delayed it a little bit because of COVID, but I was just coming off of it, like just finally recovered, negative test. Still was wiped out, but I no longer had COVID. So I went and did my labs. And just before I went into the doctor, they'd called me and they said, "Hey, are you feeling okay?" And I said, "Well, I just had COVID, And she said, "Oh, okay," because Dr. Gottlieb wanted me to call you. There was some strange things in your lab that they'd never seen before. I'm like what? So my fasting glucose was elevated. There was some leakage, I guess, from the kidneys, if I remember right. Let's see, what else was high? Some ketones were high. The glucose was definitely high. There's a few other things that were definitely amiss. And I told them that on the phone. They said, "Okay, so we'll go over that when you come in." So I come in and, I just met this doctor for the first time last year. I'd had a long-time doctor. He retired. So he looks at me and he says, "Has anything changed?" And I said, "Well, I just got over COVID." And he goes, "Oh," and he drops his pen. He's like, "No wonder." So to make a long story short, COVID really zaps the body, so take it serious. It really affected my labs big time. And the surprising part to me was how common that was. He said, "Well, no wonder. That explains all of this. Everything is going to be up and in disarray, after this infection," and so on and so on. He says, "So I want you to get 100% better." This is when I first met him, and I'm like, man, he's a good doc. "I want you to get 100% better, then I want you to redo your labs and, compare." I said, "Okay." So I did in 6 months. I redid them, and then thankfully, again, everything was back to normal. Everything was great and all. So your blood work can be really infected, but I guess this is a little educational moment to say, take these viruses pretty serious, because they do wipe your body out. And it really showed me how it not only made me sick to the point where I knew I was sick, it was messing with my intrinsic numbers too. And thankfully, everything was, due to nature, good, and all that good stuff. The body's a miracle. The body's a great thing. Everything was able to be restored. So that's that. That's the day at the docks. That was pretty fun, right? But pay attention to those numbers. Get your physical. Don't be an idiot. There's a lot you can do with your preventative medicine, absolutely, and they really do a good job with that. And play a game with it. Maybe tease the medical assistant a little bit, and see if you get further than I did with it. But so if you want to go out and try to keep your numbers good and all that, well, you gotta eat healthy. All right. So check out the old Turkish Istanbul Mediterranean Grill. I mean, these guys are good. They're up there in Ormond Beach on US 1, and they'll be there waiting for you. Check them out, please. Say, hey, Rob sent me. Rob sent me, and I want something healthy. Say, make me something healthy, and they will. All right? See ya.